Jake Morrison stood in the Great Hall of the Galactic Council. The room was huge, bigger than any building he had ever seen on Earth. Tall columns stretched up to a ceiling that seemed to touch the stars. Hundreds of alien beings filled the seats. Around him, their strange forms and colors creating a rainbow of life from across the galaxy. But today, none of that beauty mattered. Today was the day humans were being thrown out. Chairman Veltar rose from his crystal throne. He was tall and thin, made of what looked like glass. When he spoke, his voice echoed through the chamber like breaking ice. "The Council has made its decision," Veltar announced. "The human race is too dangerous to remain in our community. They are violent and cannot be trusted. All humans must leave the galaxy within 30 days. Jake felt his heart sink. He had worked for 15 years to build peace between humans and aliens. He had made friends, solved problems, and helped create treaties that saved millions of lives. Now it was all ending. Next to him sat Dr. Lisa Hayes, the best scientist humanity had ever sent to the stars. She had saved entire worlds from disease and taught alien children about the wonders of the universe. Her face was pale, but she sat straight and proud. Captain Roy Collins stood behind them in his dress uniform. He was a soldier, but he had never started a fight. He had only ended them, protecting the innocent from those who would harm them. His hand rested on his sword, not in threat, but in sadness. Around the Great Hall, representatives from dozens of worlds watched the humans with cold eyes. Some looked pleased. Others seemed uncomfortable, but none spoke up to defend humanity. The Vorthan Empire had pushed hardest for this moment. Their representative, General Vorthak, smiled as he watched the humans receive their sentence. He had spent years telling other species that humans were too aggressive, too unpredictable, too dangerous to trust. "You have 30 days, Veltar continued. "Remove all humans from every world outside your home system. Leave your stations, your colonies, your ships. Take nothing that belongs to the galaxy." Jake stood up slowly. Every eye in the chamber turned to him. He had prepared a speech, words that might change their minds. He had evidence of all the good humans had done, all the lives they had saved, all the problems they had solved. But looking at their faces, he knew it would not matter. They had already decided. Their minds were closed. "We understand," Jake said. Simply, "We will comply," that was all. No anger, no threats, no desperate pleas. Just quiet acceptance. The chamber fell silent. Many of the aliens had expected humans to fight, to argue, to cause trouble. Instead, they got dignity. After the session ended, Jake tried to speak with some of the representatives he had thought were friends. Ambassador Kithara from the Meridian Republic would not look at him. She had once called him brother, had invited him to her daughter's naming ceremony. Now she turned away. The delegate from Tau Ceti, someone Jake had helped during a trade dispute, simply said, "It is better this way, for everyone." Within hours, the evacuation began. Human ships appeared at every station, every colony, every outpost where humans lived and worked. They came quietly, efficiently, without fuss on Mining Station Alpha 7. Engineer Pete Wilson shut down the systems he had built and maintained for 8 years. The alien workers watched him pack his tools. They had worked together every day, shared meals, told stories about their different worlds. Now they said nothing. "The backup systems are in the computer," Pete told the station chief. "The manual is in the office. If anything breaks, the instructions are all there." The chief nodded but did not thank him. Pete had kept the station running. When everyone else had given up, he had worked double shifts during the Great Storm of 2387, keeping the life support systems working while others slept safely in their beds. Now he was leaving, and no one even said goodbye. Dr. Hayes watched from the observation deck as they pulled away from Sanctuary Station. This place had been her life's work, a massive medical center that served 17 different species. She had delivered babies here, saved lives, found cures for diseases that had plagued entire worlds. The station was beautiful, its white walls and blue lights creating a sense of peace and healing. In the hospital wings, patients from a dozen different Worlds were recovering from injuries and illnesses. They had been brought here because human doctors were the best in the galaxy at treating different alien biologies. Who will take care of them? Dr. Hayes asked quietly. Captain Collins stood beside her. They made their choice, he said. They don't want our help, but they need it. That's not our problem anymore. The hardest part was leaving the children. On Education Station Gamma, human teachers had been working with young aliens for 20 years. They had taught them about the universe, about friendship, about the beauty of differences. Teacher Mary Johnson sat in her empty classroom, looking at the drawings on the walls. Little alien children had drawn pictures of their families, their homeworlds, their dreams. In many of the pictures they had drawn their human teachers beside them. Will Miss Johnson come back? Asked a small Altarian child who had sneaked into the classroom. Mary knelt down and hugged the child gently. I don't think so, sweetheart, but you remember what we learned, okay? Be kind to everyone, even when they're different from you. The child nodded, tears in her big golden eyes. Across the galaxy, humans packed their belongings and left their homes. They abandoned research that could have saved millions of lives. They left behind schools where they had taught young aliens to read and write. They closed hospitals where they had worked miracles. The evacuation was perfect. No human caused trouble, no human complained, no human tried to stay behind. They followed every rule, obeyed every order, and left quietly. On the last day, Jake. Morrison stood in the council chambers one final time. The room was nearly empty now, just a few officials watching to make sure the humans really left. All human facilities have been evacuated, Jake reported. All equipment has been left in working order. Instruction manuals and maintenance schedules have been provided. The evacuation is complete. Chairman Veltar nodded. Good, the galaxy is safer now. Jake wanted to say so many things. He wanted to remind them of the Meridian Plague that humans had cured, of the Tau Ceti War that humans had prevented, of the asteroid that humans had stopped from destroying the Kepler colonies. He wanted to tell them that they were making a terrible mistake. Instead, he simply said, Ambassador Jake Morrison, signing off. The last human ship left Nexus Prime at exactly midnight Galactic Standard Time. As they passed through the jump gate, Jake looked back at the great station one last time. It had been humanity's home away from home for 30 years. Now it was just another alien structure, as foreign and distant as the day humans had first arrived. The ship's communications officer, Lieutenant Dan Murphy, looked up from his station. Sir, we're getting requests from 17 different stations. They want to know maintenance schedules, medical procedures, engineering specifications. What should I tell them? Jake thought for a moment. Tell them to contact the Galactic Council. We're no longer authorized to provide assistance outside the Sol system. As the human fleet jumped to hyperspace, heading home to Earth, the galaxy became a little darker. The species that remained didn't know it yet, but they had just lost their best friends, their most reliable allies, and their most capable problem solvers. They had wanted the humans gone, and now they had their wish. Soon they would learn what that really meant. The last transmission from the human fleet was simple. Safe journey to all. We wish you well. Then silence. 6 months had passed since the humans left, and Foreman Grickstall was staring at his worst nightmare. The mining equipment on Kepler 442b had been running perfectly for 8 years. Now half of it was broken, and he had no idea how to fix it. The Altarians stood in the main equipment bay, surrounded by massive machines that had once hummed with life. Now they sat silent and cold, their metal surfaces covered in warning lights that flashed angry red. Status report, Grickstall called to his assistant, a young Altarian named Kylanth. The primary excavator is down, Kylanth replied, reading from his tablet. The ore processors are running at 30% capacity. The transport system keeps jamming every few hours. Grickstall felt his crystal skin dim with worry. The Altarian people were masters of energy manipulation. They could bend light, store power in their crystalline bodies, and create shields that could stop plasma bolts. But they had never been good with mechanical things. What did the human engineer always say? Grixtel asked, trying to remember. Pete. Wilson used to say that machines are like living things, Kylanth answered. They need care and attention every day, not just when they break. Grixtel nodded sadly. Pete had made everything look so easy. He would walk through the facility each morning, listening to the sounds the machines made, touching their surfaces, checking their displays. He seemed to know what they needed before they even broke down. He would fix things with his hands, Grixtel said, while explaining how the quantum processors worked. Made it all seem so simple. Now, without Pete's daily care, the machines were dying one by one. The Altarians had tried to follow the instruction manuals he had left behind, but the books were full of terms they didn't understand and procedures they couldn't perform. Meanwhile, 3 systems away, Dr. Zethmorin was facing his own crisis. The research station orbiting Vega had been the pride of the Kepler Federation, a place where the greatest minds in the galaxy came to solve the hardest problems. The station's medical bay had been closed for 3 months now. The Kepler Federation had doctors, but they only knew how to treat their own species. The humans had been different. They seemed to understand how all the different alien biologies worked together. Now, a plague was spreading through the vegan colonies, affecting 3 different species at once. The vegans were plant-based life forms who absorbed nutrients through their skin. The Kepler colonists were silicon-based beings who needed metal supplements. The Tau Ceti traders were water-based creatures who breathed liquid. We need to create medicine that works for all 3 groups, Dr. Zethmorin explained to the station commander. But each species processes chemicals differently. What heals one might poison another. The commander, a tall Kepler named Vertash, looked frustrated. How long will it take? We have been working for 6 weeks, Dr. Zethmorin replied. The human doctors could have done this in hours. They had some kind of understanding of biological systems that we lack. Dr. Zethmorin remembered Dr. Hayes, the human scientist who had worked on the station. She had once cured a virus that was killing Meridian children by combining medicines from 4 different worlds. She had done it in one afternoon, working with a smile on her face. She used to say that all life is connected. Dr. Zethmorin told his team that the same principles work everywhere, you just have to know how to see them. But seeing those connections was proving impossible without human insight. Each day, more colonists fell ill and the medical team grew more desperate. The worst. Disaster was happening in the Outer Rim. The Proxima colonies were home to 3 million Meridian civilians who had fled their war-torn homeworld. They lived on a cluster of asteroids that had been converted into habitats, floating in the cold darkness of space. When their sun began to flare unexpectedly, the evacuation should have been routine. The Sanctuary Station had handled hundreds of similar emergencies. But the Sanctuary Station was gone, and the replacement facility was not ready. Commander Bethran of the Meridian Fleet watched in horror as the evacuation turned into chaos. Ships arrived from 12 different worlds, but no one was coordinating their efforts. The Altarian vessels were too small for Meridian families. The Kepler ships had the wrong atmospheric mix. The Vorthan military craft were not designed for civilians at all. Docking Bay 7 is overcrowded, reported her communications officer. 3 ships are trying to dock at the same time. Bay 12 has atmospheric breach, called another officer. The Tau Ceti rescue ship is incompatible with our life support. Bethran tried to manage the crisis, but it was like trying to conduct an orchestra when all the musicians were playing different songs. Each species had their own procedures, their own technologies, their own ideas about how rescues should work. The humans had been different. They had created universal protocols that worked for everyone. They had trained teams from every species to work together. They had planned for every possible disaster. Where are the humans? Bethran found herself asking. They would have had U.S. all organized and safe by now. Ships collided in the confusion. Refugees were loaded onto vessels that couldn't support their biology. Entire families were separated as different ships departed at different times. What should have been a smooth Evacuation became a tragedy. By the time the chaos ended, over 2,000 Meridian civilians were dead. Not from the solar flare, but from the failed rescue attempt. Back on Nexus Prime, Chairman Veltar was receiving reports from across the galaxy. Every day brought new problems, new failures, new disasters. The carefully ordered galactic civilization was falling apart. Trade routes are failing, reported Economic Advisor Quinter. The shipping schedules that the humans maintained are no longer being updated. Cargo ships are arriving at empty stations or colliding with each other. The Universal Translation System is breaking down, added Communications Director Falmouth. The humans updated the language databases every month. Now we're seeing communication errors between species who have traded for decades. Veltar dismissed these concerns with a wave of his crystalline hand. The galaxy is simply adjusting to a new balance, he said. We do not need the humans. We managed without them for thousands of years, but the reports kept coming. The orbital cities around Centauri Prime were experiencing power fluctuations. The terraform systems on New Kepler were producing toxic gases instead of breathable air. The medical exchange program that had shared life-saving treatments between worlds had completely collapsed. Perhaps we should consider contacting Earth, suggested Advisor Quinter quietly. Valtar's crystal body flared with anger. Never, we made the right decision. The humans were dangerous, unpredictable. The galaxy is safer without them. That night, alone in his private chambers, Veltar reviewed the economic data. Galactic trade was down 40%. 7 major construction projects had been abandoned. The interspecies cooperation programs were failing one by one. He looked at a holographic display, showing the galaxy's communication network. For centuries, it had been a bright web of light connecting every world. Now dark patches were spreading as systems failed and no one knew how to repair them. 3 systems away, young Kylanth was working alone in the mining facility. Most of the equipment had shut down completely. In desperation, he had started digging through the human engineer's personal files, looking for something that might help. Hidden in a folder marked Emergency Procedures, he found a simple text message. It was from Pete Wilson, the human engineer who had maintained the facility for 8 years. If you are reading this, something has gone very wrong, the message said. The backup systems are in folder 7 alpha, the repair procedures are in folder 12 beta. Remember, machines are like people. They work better when they know someone cares about them. Good luck, we always believed in you. Kylanth felt tears form in his crystal eyes. Even after being thrown out, even after being told they were unwanted, the humans had still tried to help. They had left detailed instructions, backup plans, and encouraging words for the people who came after them. As he began to follow Pete's instructions, Kylanth whispered to the silent machines, I'm sorry, we should have listened. We should have learned. Across the galaxy, the same realization was beginning to dawn on others. The humans had not just been another species in the galactic community. They had been the ones who made the community work. They had been the problem solvers, the bridge builders, the ones who kept everything running smoothly. Now they were gone, and the galaxy was learning what it meant to be alone. The question that haunted every world, every station, every ship was becoming impossible to ignore. What have we done? 1 year after the humans left, the Galactic Council was facing the worst crisis in its 1,000-year history. Chairman Veltar stood before an emergency session, looking out at representatives from dozens of worlds. Many seats were empty. Some species could no longer afford to send delegates. Others had lost contact with the central government entirely. The great communication network that had connected the galaxy was failing. The Zephyrian Collective, masters of crystal technology, could not maintain the hyperspace relay systems that humans had built. Messages that once traveled across the galaxy in hours now took weeks. Some worlds had gone completely silent. The Kepler Federation reports total system failure on 3 colony worlds, announced Secretary Morden, reading from a long list of disasters. The Altarian Republic has lost contact with its outer mining stations. The Meridian evacuation. Camps are experiencing disease outbreaks with no medical support. Veltar tried to maintain his authority, but his crystal body had lost its bright glow. The stress of constant crises was taking its toll on the Zephyrian leader. "These are temporary problems," he insisted. "Every great civilization faces challenges. We will overcome them without human interference." But even as he spoke, another report arrived. The Tau Ceti system was facing complete ecological collapse. The terraformed systems that had taken centuries to perfect were breaking down. The atmosphere was slowly turning toxic, and 8 million beings faced death. Ambassador Kithara of the Meridian Republic had been traveling for months, visiting abandoned human facilities across the galaxy. What she found amazed and horrified her. The humans had left behind detailed records of everything they had done, but the records revealed just how much work they had been doing in secret. "Look at this," she told her aide, standing in the ruins of a human agricultural station. They were monitoring soil conditions on 47 different worlds. They were preventing crop failures that could have caused famines affecting billions of beings. Her aide, a young Meridian named Bethcor, picked up a data pad from a dusty desk. "These are weather modification schedules," she said. "The humans were adjusting atmospheric conditions to prevent storms that could have destroyed entire cities." Kithara felt sick as she realized the truth. "We thought they were just being helpful neighbors. We had no idea they were preventing disasters we never even knew about." The most shocking discovery came when Dr. Zethmoran led a team to analyze human contributions to galactic science. They had expected to find some useful research, maybe a few helpful inventions. Instead, they found that human innovations were everywhere. "The radiation shields that protect our ships from solar flares," Dr. Zethmoran reported to the Emergency Council session, human-designed. "The atmospheric processors that make dead worlds livable, human technology. The medical scanners that detect diseases across species barriers, human invention." The list went on and on. Crop rotation systems that prevented soil exhaustion. Water purification methods that worked on any world. Even the diplomatic protocols that had prevented wars between species were based on human psychology studies. "They never asked for credit," Dr. Zethmoran continued, his voice filled with shame. "They shared their knowledge freely, asking only that it be used to help others. We took their gifts and threw them away." The breaking point came when the core worlds themselves began to fail. Nexus Prime, the great station that housed the Galactic Council, started experiencing critical system failures. The massive structure that had orbited its star for 800 years was slowly dying. Engineering teams from every species worked desperately to repair the failing systems. The Zephyrians tried to reroute power through their crystal networks. The Kepler Federation attempted to replace damaged components with their own technology. The Altarians poured energy into the dying systems. Nothing worked. The station was too complex, too integrated, too dependent on technologies that only humans fully understood. "We have identified 3,000 critical subsystems," Chief Engineer Volter reported to the Emergency Council. "Each one needs maintenance that follows human procedures. We are fighting a battle we cannot win." Life support was failing in entire sections of the station. The artificial gravity generators were breaking down. The food production centers were producing inedible waste instead of nutritious meals. For the first time in galactic history, the Council was forced to consider abandoning Nexus Prime. The final straw came during what should have been a routine rescue operation. A transport ship carrying 500 vegan refugees had suffered engine failure near the Barrier Nebula. The rescue should have been simple, but without human coordination protocols, it became a nightmare. 3 different rescue fleets arrived at the same time, each following their own procedures. The Vorthan military ships tried to use their tractor beams, but the power levels were wrong for the civilian transport. The Altarian rescue vessels couldn't match the ship's spin. The Kepler Federation medical ships arrived too late. Ambassador Kithara watched from the command center as the disaster unfolded. She had volunteered to coordinate the rescue, but the different species couldn't work together. Their technologies were incompatible, their procedures conflicted, their communications were confused. Rescue Ship Alpha, reduce your tractor beam power, she called into her communicator. Negative control, came the reply from the Vorthen captain. Our procedures require maximum power for emergency extractions. Altarian vessels match the transport's rotation, she tried again. Unable to comply, replied the Altarian commander. Our ships are not designed for that type of maneuver. Kithara watched helplessly as the rescue operation fell apart. The transport ship broke apart under the stress of conflicting rescue attempts. 500 innocent beings died, not from their original emergency, but from the failed rescue. That night, she stood alone in her quarters and remembered the human rescue operations she had witnessed. They had been like watching a dance. Every ship knew its role, every captain understood the plan, every crew member worked toward the same goal. They made it look easy, she whispered to herself. We never realized how hard it actually was. Intelligence reports began to reveal the full scope of what the galaxy had lost. Agent Quinder of the Altarian Republic had been investigating human activities in the years before their expulsion. What he found changed everything. The humans were secretly preventing conflicts across the galaxy, he reported to a closed council session. In the past 5 years alone, they stopped 43 different potential wars before they could start. The evidence was overwhelming. Trade disputes that could have led to violence settled by human mediators. Territorial conflicts resolved through human-designed negotiations. Resource wars prevented by human logistical solutions. They were not just keeping the peace, Quinder continued. They were teaching us how to keep it ourselves. Every treaty they helped create included training for local peacekeepers. Every solution they provided came with instructions for handling similar problems in the future. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. The humans had not been trying to control the galaxy. They had been trying to teach it how to control itself. Even General Vorthak, the Vorthen who had led the campaign against humanity, was beginning to understand. His empire had conquered 12 systems since the humans left, but he could not govern them. The occupied worlds were in constant rebellion, his supply lines were failing, and his own officers were questioning his leadership. We are strong enough to take worlds, he admitted to his staff, but not wise enough to rule them. The humans had gifts we mistook for weaknesses. Chairman Veltar, facing calls for his resignation from every remaining member species, finally admitted the truth in a private session with his closest advisors. We have made a terrible mistake, he said, his crystal body dim with shame. The humans were not the problem with our civilization. They were what made our civilization possible. But admitting the mistake was only the beginning. The real question was whether anything could be done to fix it. The galaxy was falling apart faster every day. Entire star systems were going dark. Species that had been allies for centuries were now enemies. The great dream of galactic unity was dying, and somewhere far away in the Sol system, the humans continued their quiet exile. They monitored the situation through long-range sensors, but they made no move to help. They had been told they were unwanted, and they had accepted that judgment. The question that haunted every council session, every emergency meeting, every desperate planning session was simple but terrifying. Would the humans even listen if the galaxy asked for help? After such a complete betrayal, after being branded as dangerous and expelled in disgrace, would humanity even care what happened to the civilization that had rejected them? As the galaxy burned around them, the remaining leaders began to realize that pride was a luxury they could no longer afford. But swallowing that pride might be the hardest thing any of them had ever done. 2 years after the humans left, the Galactic Council was dying. Half the member worlds had lost contact with the central government. The great station of Nexus Prime was running on emergency power, its corridors dark and cold. Chairman Veltar had resigned in disgrace, leaving behind a government that nobody trusted or respected. The new council leader was Ambassador Thelver from the Centauri Alliance. She was younger than most galactic leaders, but she had been chosen because she was one of the few who had voted against the human expulsion. Now she faced the impossible task of holding together a civilization that was falling apart. We cannot Continue like this, she announced to the emergency session. Only 30 delegates remain from the original hundreds. Our choice is simple. We humble ourselves before humanity and ask for help, or we watch everything our ancestors built turn to dust. The Vorthan Empire was crumbling from within. General Vorthak, who had once been so proud of his military conquests, now stood before the council as a broken leader. His empire controlled more territory than ever before, but he could not make any of it work. My forces can take any world, he admitted, his voice heavy with shame. But we cannot feed the people, cannot maintain. The infrastructure cannot keep the peace. Every world we conquer becomes a burden that drains our strength. Without human administrators, the occupied territories were in constant rebellion. Without human engineers, the infrastructure was collapsing. Without human mediators, different species under Vorthan rule were fighting each other instead of working. Together, I volunteer to join the delegation to Earth, Vorthak said, surprising everyone in the chamber. I was wrong about the humans. If anyone should face their judgment, it should be me. Dr. Zethmorin had spent months trying to save the Tau Ceti system. The terraforming equipment was failing faster than his teams could repair it. The atmosphere was becoming toxic and millions of beings were preparing to die. We have maybe 6 months before the air becomes unbreathable, he reported to the council. Our best scientists have tried everything. We need the humans who designed these systems, or everyone on Tau Ceti will suffocate. The doctor had found human instruction manuals for the terraform systems, but they were impossibly complex. The humans had created machines that could turn dead worlds into gardens, but only they understood how to keep those machines running. They left us blueprints, Dr. Zethmorin explained. But it's like giving a child the plans for a starship. We can see what they built, but we cannot recreate their genius. Ambassador Kithara had become the voice of those who regretted the human expulsion. She had visited more abandoned human facilities than anyone else, and what she found haunted her dreams. They were not just helping us, she told the council. They were preparing us to help ourselves. Every human facility I visited had training, programs for local workers. Every human project included plans to hand control over to alien partners. She had found records of human teachers working overtime to train alien students. Human doctors creating medical programs that alien physicians could manage. Human engineers designing systems that alien workers could maintain. They were not trying to make us dependent, she continued, her voice breaking with emotion. They were trying to make us independent. But we threw them out before we finished learning. The breaking point came when Nexus Prime itself began to die. The great station that had been the center of galactic government for 8 centuries was finally succumbing to cascading system failures. Chief Engineer Volter made one last desperate attempt to save the station. He gathered every expert from every species, pooling their knowledge in a final effort to keep their home alive. We have 48 hours before life support fails completely, he announced to the engineering teams. After that, we will have to evacuate 30 million beings with no place for them to go. The engineers worked without sleep, following every human manual they could find. But the station was too old, too complex, too dependent on technologies that required human intuition to maintain. It's like trying to perform surgery with a cookbook, one engineer complained. We can follow the steps, but we don't understand why they work. As the deadline approached, Volter made a decision that would have been unthinkable 2 years earlier. He sent a direct message to Earth, bypassing the Council entirely. "This is Chief Engineer Volter of Nexus Prime Station," he transmitted toward the Sol system. "We are facing complete system failure. 30 million lives are at stake. We are requesting immediate humanitarian assistance." The response came 12 hours later. It was not from the Earth government, but from a civilian engineer named Carl Roberts who had once worked on Nexus Prime. "I am no longer authorized to provide official assistance," the message said. "But I cannot stand by and watch people die. The emergency protocols you need are in Section 7 of the Primary Maintenance Database. God help you all." Using Carl's guidance, the engineering teams managed to stabilize life support with only 6 hours to spare. 30 million beings continued to breathe because a human engineer, expelled from the galaxy in disgrace, could not bear to let them suffocate. The incident convinced even the most stubborn council members that they needed to swallow their pride. Ambassador Thelver assembled a small delegation to travel to Earth. The group included herself, Dr. Zeth Morin, Ambassador Cathara, and surprisingly, General Vorthak. "We go not as representatives of a government," Thelver announced, "but as individuals who have seen the consequences of our mistakes. We go to ask for wisdom, not to demand assistance." The journey to the Sol system took 3 weeks. During the trip, the delegates prepared their words carefully. They knew they had only one chance to convince humanity to listen. As their small ship approached Earth's outer defenses, they were met by Captain Danny Rodriguez of the Earth Defense Force. His message was polite but cold. "State your business." "In the Sol system," Captain Rodriguez transmitted, "you have 10 minutes to explain your presence before you will be escorted back to the galactic boundary." The captain's tone made it clear that humans had not forgotten their treatment. They had been told they were dangerous, unwanted, incompatible with galactic civilization. Now, the galaxy that had rejected them was asking for help. "We request an audience with human leadership," Ambassador Thelver replied. "We come not as officials, but as beings who have learned from our mistakes." The human colonial authority was dissolved by order of the Galactic Council, Captain Rodriguez responded. "We no longer maintain diplomatic relations with galactic governments. Your 10 minutes are up." As the human escort ships moved to guide them away, Cathara made a desperate personal appeal. She opened a direct communication channel and spoke from her heart. "Captain Rodriguez, we are not here as representatives of the government that expelled you. We are here as individuals who have witnessed what our galaxy has become without you. We have seen the suffering, the failures, the deaths that could have been prevented." She paused, gathering her courage for what came next. "We were wrong about humanity," she continued. "We feared your capacity for violence and missed your greater capacity for protection. We saw your independence and missed your dedication to cooperation. We thought you were the problem, but you were the solution." There was a long silence. Finally, Captain Rodriguez responded. "You will be allowed to land at Denver Spaceport," he said. "You will be met by former Ambassador Jake Morrison. He will decide whether human leadership will see you." As their ship descended through Earth's atmosphere, the delegates saw a world transformed. Floating cities drifted through the clouds. The oceans teemed with new habitats. Mars glowed green in the distance, fully terraformed and populated. Humanity had not been idle during their exile. They had turned inward, focusing on their own development, achieving wonders that amazed their former colleagues. Jake Morrison met them at the spaceport. He was older now, his hair gray, his face lined with the stress of the past 2 years. But his eyes were still kind, still filled with the compassion that had made him such an effective diplomat. "Welcome to Earth," he said simply. "I understand. You have something to say to us." Dr. Zeth Morin stepped forward, his voice shaking with emotion. "We have come to admit that we were wrong. Wrong about your nature, wrong about your intentions, wrong about your value to galactic civilization. We threw you out because we feared what you might become," added General Vorthak. "Now we fear what we have become without you." Jake Morrison looked at each of them in turn, seeing the desperation in their eyes, the genuine regret in their voices. These were not the same proud leaders who had expelled humanity 2 years ago. These were broken beings who had learned the price of their prejudice. "The question is not whether we can help you," Jake said quietly. "The question is whether you are ready to accept what help truly means." He gestured toward the bustling spaceport. Around them, where humans and a few alien visitors worked side by side. "We never stopped believing in the dream of galactic cooperation," he continued. "But we learned that cooperation requires mutual respect, not just convenience." As the delegates followed Jake toward the transport that would take them to meet with human leadership, they knew their real test was just beginning. They had come to ask for humanity's return, but humanity 6 months had passed since the alien delegation arrived on Earth. They had expected to stay for a few days, maybe a week. Instead, they found themselves living among humans, learning what their former partners had become during their exile. Dr. Zeth Morin stood on the observation deck of New Geneva Station, watching the floating city drift through the clouds above Earth. The technology was amazing, but what impressed him more was how peaceful everything seemed. Humans worked alongside. The few alien visitors without tension, without fear, without the constant suspicion that had poisoned galactic relations. "You have achieved so much," he told Dr. Lisa Hayes, who had agreed to show him around the research facilities. "In just 2 years, you have advanced further than the galaxy has in decades." Dr. Hayes smiled sadly. "We had to," she replied. "When you lose everything, you learn to focus on what really matters. We stopped trying to please everyone else and started working on ourselves." The delegation had been given complete freedom to explore human civilization. They visited the underwater cities and Earth's oceans, where humans had learned to live in harmony with sea life. They traveled to Mars, where red deserts had been transformed into green forests and blue lakes. They saw the asteroid belt, where humans had built mining stations that worked with nature instead of against it. But the most impressive thing was not the technology. It was the people. General Vorthak found himself in a small town in Montana, where former Ambassador Jake Morrison worked as a teacher. The Vorthan warrior watched in amazement as Jake taught human children about alien cultures, using the same patience and kindness he had once shown to galactic leaders. "Why do you still teach them about us?" Vorthak asked after the school day ended. "After what we did to you?" Jake looked out the classroom window at children playing in the yard. Some were human, but others were young aliens whose families had chosen to stay on Earth after the expulsion. "Because knowledge is not the enemy," Jake replied. "Fear of knowledge is the enemy. Fear of differences is the enemy. We teach our children about the galaxy because someday, maybe, we will all learn to live together again." Vorthak felt shame burn in his chest. He had spent years telling his people that humans were dangerous, that they could not be trusted. Now he was seeing human children learn about Vorthan culture with curiosity and respect. "I was wrong about your people," he said quietly. "You were afraid?" Jake corrected. "Fear makes everyone do stupid things. The question is whether we can learn from our mistakes." The real negotiations began when the delegation was finally brought before President Alex Carter. The meeting took place in the Memorial Garden in Geneva, where humanity honored the victims of the galactic disasters they had been unable to prevent. President Carter was a former military officer who had opposed joining the Galactic Council from the beginning. He had argued that aliens would never truly accept humanity as equals. The expulsion had proven him right, but he took no satisfaction in being correct. "You expelled us because you feared what we might become," President Carter said, addressing the alien delegates who sat before him. "Now you want us back because you fear what you have become without us?" Ambassador Thelver bowed her head. "We offer you full membership in the Galactic Council, favorable trade agreements, and compensation for the forced evacuation. We ask only that you return and help us rebuild." President Carter shook his head. "You think this is about trade agreements and council seats? You branded us as dangerous to galactic civilization. You made us outcasts in our own galaxy. Now you want us to come back and fix your problems. But what happens the next time you decide we are inconvenient?" The question hung in the air like a sword. The delegates had expected to negotiate terms and conditions. They had not expected to face the deeper question of trust. Jake Morrison, who had been standing quietly nearby, stepped forward. "Trust, once broken, cannot be simply restored," he said. "You did not just ask us to leave. You told the galaxy that we were too dangerous to exist among civilized beings. How do we know you won't change your minds again?" Dr. Zeth Morin spoke up, his voice shaking with emotion. "Because we have seen what happens without you. We have watched our civilization crumble. We have seen the suffering, the death, the chaos that follows when fear drives out wisdom." He stood and walked to one of the memorial statues, a monument. to the Meridian children who had died in the failed evacuation. These children died because we were too proud to ask for help, he continued. Too stubborn to admit we needed you? Their blood is on our hands, and we will carry that shame forever. General Vorthak rose next, his warrior's pride finally broken. I led the campaign against you, he admitted. I convinced others that humans were a threat to galactic peace. I was wrong. You were not the threat, I was. He removed his military insignia and placed them on the memorial altar. I offer myself for judgment by human courts. If my crimes demand punishment, I will accept. The gesture shocked everyone. Vorthans never surrendered, never admitted defeat, never showed weakness. But here was their greatest general, offering himself to the justice of the species he had wronged. Ambassador Kithara was the last to speak. She had brought something with her, a small data device that she placed before President Carter. This contains footage from the recent disaster at Mining Station Beta-9, she said. Please watch it. The holographic display showed a mining accident in the outer rim. The station's life support had failed, trapping 300 workers of different species inside. The rescue operation was falling apart, ships arriving too late or with the wrong equipment, but then something unexpected happened. A small human ship appeared on the edge of the recording. It had no official markings, no government authorization. It was just a civilian vessel with a crew of human volunteers. They had come anyway. Despite the expulsion, despite the rejection, despite the risk of arrest, they had come to help. The recording showed human volunteers coordinating the rescue, using their own equipment to save lives, working alongside alien crews who should have been their enemies. They saved 270 beings that day, then quietly disappeared before official rescue ships arrived. Your people came anyway, Kithara said, tears flowing down her face. Your government had been dissolved, your authority had been revoked, but they came anyway. That is when we truly understood what we had lost. President Carter watched the recording in silence. When it ended, he looked at each of the delegates in turn. We have been monitoring the galactic situation, he said quietly. We have been secretly providing aid through intermediaries, sending medical supplies through neutral traders, sharing technical information through back channels. He gestured to the memorial garden around them. We could not stand by and watch civilizations collapse, even civilizations that had rejected us. It is not in our nature to abandon those in need. The negotiations that followed took weeks. The humans presented their conditions: full autonomy for human colonies, guaranteed representation in council leadership, and most importantly, a new galactic charter that would protect all species from persecution based on fear or prejudice. Never again, Jake Morrison said during one of the sessions. Never again will any species be expelled because others fear their differences. Never again will any being be judged by their potential for violence rather than their capacity for good. The final ceremony took place not on Nexus Prime, but on a new station called New Sanctuary. It had been built jointly by humans and the species they were returning to help, a symbol of the cooperation they hoped to achieve. President Carter signed the new Galactic Charter alongside representatives from 50 worlds. The document included humanity's Bill of Rights for all species, establishing protections that would prevent future expulsions based on prejudice. We return not as the junior partners you once tolerated, President Carter announced. We return as equals with the understanding that diversity of thought and approach is not a weakness to be managed, but a strength to be celebrated. Admiral Roy Collins, now head of the Joint Defense Force, watched human ships depart Earth's orbit. They carried not just technology and expertise, but a new understanding of what it meant to be part of a galactic community. We left without a word because we understood that sometimes the greatest strength is knowing when to walk away. He reflected. We return with many words because we have learned that the greatest wisdom is knowing when to come back. In her final report, Ambassador Kithara wrote, Today we learned that true strength is not the power to destroy, but the wisdom to build, the courage to protect, and the grace to forgive. The humans have taught us all three. As the first mixed Crews took their stations on new sanctuary. The galaxy began to heal. It would take years to repair all the damage, decades to rebuild the trust that had been broken. But for the first time in 2 years, there was hope. The humans had returned, not as conquerors or saviors, but as partners in building something better than what came before. They had taught the galaxy that diversity was not a threat to be eliminated, but a gift to be cherished. The age of fear was ending. The age of cooperation was beginning again.